about 9:05, so I think we're gonna get started. So I just like to welcome you all to the Solano County Outreach meeting for redistricting. And I've got a short presentation. I'm glad that most of you picked up maps already. We'll talk about those kind of towards the end. But this presentation will cover redistricting basics, the redistricting advisory committee. We have 2 members in attendance today. Some traditional redistricting principles, and then a communities of interest description. And then we'll go into the maps and the online tool. So what is redistricting? Redistricting happens every 10 years after the U.S. Census completes their total count. And in the odd years, of course, once the census is released. Solano County went through this process in 2011 to redistrict and to rebalance the lines, as you can see on all of the maps that you picked up on the way in. And one of the biggest criteria, is just to rebalance and make sure we have equal populations amongst all the districts. In this cycle, the Board of Supervisors decided to create a 15-member redistricting advisory committee. And as I mentioned, 2 of the members are here today. And their purpose is to conduct these outreach meetings to identify communities of interest, which we hope you guys will all submit today after this presentation, and then create a report to the board of all the community of interest testimony that's been presented to them through the 5 virtual outreach hearings that already been conducted, and through the 5 in-person redistricting advisory commission outreach hearings, which this is the 4th one. So you can see District 4's lead is actually here in the back, Sean. Oh no. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I was going to say Sean. He's in the back, and he's been helping, as all the RAC committee members are, to get public input throughout this process. So just a little bit about the redistricting timeline that we're undertaking. So the RAC was appointed and had its first meeting on May 20th. We began our series of outreach meetings on June 23rd. And our actual last outreach hearing will be next Saturday. And then basically the RAC will have a series of meetings in September to put together a final report to the Board of Supervisors about all the information that they've collected over this 3-month process. So now I want to just get into the traditional redistricting principles. The one I think that most people think about is the first one, that all districts should be relatively one-sized, people, not citizens. And with local redistricting, we actually have the ability to have districts, they don't have to be exactly equal. They can vary by about 10% deviation between the highest populated district and the lowest. Another criteria that is high and that is used throughout the country is that districts have to be contiguous. And that just means that they have to touch each other. All the land in the district has to touch itself. And that's an easy way to think about that is you can draw the district lines with one line without picking up your pen on a map. And the next criteria is why we're here today, is that under the Fair Maps Act, maintaining communities of interest is a very high criteria. It's the 3rd criteria that the Board of Supervisors will have to follow when they're drawing district lines. And the purpose of all of these outreach hearings is really to hear from you about your community of interest and the important communities to keep together in a district, and some discussion of where division should occur. Like in the city of Vallejo, which we know is too big to be in one supervisorial district. Our first hearing we had there was a lot of discussion on parts of Vallejo that should be kept together and parts that could be split off into another district. Same kind of idea for Fairfield. right? Is if we have to split the city, is there a dividing line that makes the most sense? Well, let's get into what communities of interest are. So communities of interest are the building blocks that we use to build districts. And one thing that I think many people think about when they think of redistricting is that everything has to be defined by data, by populations, by objective data that you can plot on a map. And that's really not what communities of interest are. They're the communities, they're your communities, and they're subjective, and they're open-ended, and can be really as detailed and as large as you think of your own communities as, or as small as your small neighborhood, where you maybe walk your dog or go to the park. There are also communities that are protected under Federal Voting Rights Act, Latino, Asian, and African American, but Solano County's redistricting really doesn't fall under the Federal Voting Rights Section 2 requirements for compliance, because you don't have a concentrated minority group that can be 50 plus of a district. So we don't really need to get into that analysis under the Voting Rights Act for Solano County. Go ahead.
You're saying 50 plus like percentage?
So right. So for the Voting Rights Act in Section 2 to apply, you have to be able to draw a Latino, Asian, or African American group that's 50 plus 1% of that district by citizen voting age population. It's a data set that's been developed by the Department of Justice to basically test for compliance of the Federal Voting Rights Act. There's also some other requirements that Solano doesn't meet, so we don't really need to worry about that as much in this instance. It's really about those subjective communities of interest that you guys all live in and know without, plotting data points on a map.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And I think the where Latinos, Asian, and other ethnic information can come into redistricting, but it can't be the predominant factor when drawing communities. So this is a listing of a handful of communities of interest out there. You have historical communities, you have cultural communities and cultural amenities, religious facilities, rural and agricultural areas, urban areas, downtown areas. So as you can see, the list is, I think this is 20 different communities of interest that often come up in redistricting, but there are hundreds more. And we're just trying to show that it's really open-ended for the public to talk about their communities of interest, because it's so important under the Fair Maps Act to have your input as we draw the lines. And then just a couple things that are not communities of interest under the Fair Maps Act. So we can't draw, a community of interest can't be defined by a political party, an incumbent, or political candidate. And one of the other issues that is just, it's not illegal, but it's hard to do, would be to draw a district around something that maybe everyone in the county believes in, or is worried about, or binds them together, right? Because you couldn't then define that community on a map, because it would be countywide. So we really, when you're drawing your communities of interest and when you're submitting your testimony, we like to think of these three questions as a way to guide you in that process. One, does the community have a shared culture, characteristics, or bond? Two, is the community geographic in nature? Can it be mapped on your placemats? And the third question really is, what is your community's relationship to the Board of Supervisors and to county services? Those three questions really help, or hopefully help you guys define what your communities of interest are, and allow you to present them to us for this process. So now I'm just going to go through a couple examples of communities of interest, just to kind of test you to see if you know if they're a community of interest for redistricting purposes. So the first one is a group of renters who live in downtown Vallejo testifies to the county's redistricting committee. Would this be a community of interest? Exactly, shared neighborhood, geographic in nature, and they have a similar interest, right, for county services. Here's the next one. It's a historically recognized town dating back to the late 1800s, but now has a minimal population, but within the lines of the county. Would this be a community of interest?
Yes.
Yes. Historical communities are recognized as communities of interest, and they should be considered when we draw our maps. The third one, a group of almond and walnut farmers concentrated in the rural unincorporated areas of the county, focused on ensuring they have enough water for their orchards. Would this be a community of interest?
Yes.
Yeah. Again, it's geographic area, right? The unincorporated. They're unified by their water needs, so of course it's a community of interest. The last one, a statewide group for people who are fans of San Francisco Giants testifies to the county's redistricting commission. What do you think?
No.
No. You're right. You guys got all of them right. So no, we can't plot Giant fans on the map. They're all over the county. So they wouldn't really be a community of interest for us. So we also wanted just to point out the other ways you guys can also submit community of interest testimony. Another way is you can go on the website and fill out a community of interest worksheet. Or you can go to Districtor, which we're going to go into in a minute, and submit maps. Now there's two kind of processes, two different phases. So the first phase is what we're in now up until end of September, where we're building up a community of interest mapping to submit to the Board of Supervisors. And then after that process starts and the board takes over and starts doing districts, we're really going to be asking for district plans. So instead of just drawing a community, drawing all 5 districts of Solano County. So I'll go into a districting or districtor demonstration in a minute, but it's a great way to both draw communities of interest, so on your computer, or for the next phase, the full 5 district plan. The other way that we love to do it, and thank you all for being here, so hopefully you can sketch out your community on these placemats, is through this placemat. Now you can draw your community today, fill out the information on the map, and leave it with us. Or if you wanted to have more time, you can take it home, take a picture of your community, and then email it back to us, and we'll make sure to put it up online and have it added to the report from the RAC. And this is the community of interest, or the outreach meetings. So we're, of course, today is the 21st. We're in District 4. The last in-person outreach hearing, the last outreach hearing for the process is next Saturday in District 5. I think it's at the Cordelia Library at 9 a.m. So if anybody that you know wasn't able to attend today or prior.
It's at the Elmira Fire Station.
Sorry. The Elmira Fire Station on the 28th. It's also, all that information is on the website. But please invite anybody you know that wants to go. That'll be their last opportunity to be in person for an outreach meeting and have a presentation like this with placemats. So all of this information, again, is at redistricting.solanocounty.com. And if you want to take these home with you and take a picture of them and submit those on email, you can email them to redistricting@solanocounty.com. And that's the end of the presentation. Now I'll switch over to just showing you how you can do the same thing online through Districtor. So if you go to this website, districtor.org/tag/Solano County, you'll come to this page. And right now, what you can do is click on this red button to draw your community of interest. And if we scroll down, you can see the community of interest that already have been submitted through this tool. There's been 5 communities of interest submitted. And when you save your plan will come like this and be placed on the homepage so everyone else in the public can see it. So if you click on this button, you're taken to a map of Solano County. And there's a couple tools or buttons that you can use, of course, to zoom in. You can use this plus and minus to zoom into an area. You can also use this hand tool that I have right now to move things around on the map. So what I'm going to try to do is zoom into where we are. Okay. So now we're here in Vacaville, and if I wanted to submit a community of interest map, I could click on this paintbrush tool and have the ability to make the paintbrush really large. So it'll take in 77 census blocks, or very small if I want to get very granular with my drawings will only be like five census blocks at a time. So I like to draw like smaller, more precise communities. So let's move in and draw here. So I can maybe come off 80, maybe I live in this community here, and I just sketch out and hold and brush through the area I want to select. And then if I've gone too far, like I don't like this, I didn't mean to add this section over here. I can use the eraser button and erase it. I can also use the magnifying glass to get information on specific census blocks. So you can see, this census block only has 4 people in it. Looks like it's attached to a shopping area. But if you go farther south, maybe to a census block that's a little bigger, this one has 841 people in it, and you can see the ethnic breakdown of the census block.
I have a question though. Are those figures based on respondents only?
Yes.
Or projected people?
No, well, so
Respondents?
sorry. So actually, right now we're in the process of converting the district there to the 2020 census populations that came out last week.
Okay.
That should be up next week.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, this is actually an estimated population from the American Community Survey.
Okay.
So this is technically estimated data at this moment, but will be updated to 2020 census populations next week.
Okay. And those are censuses, people actually responded to the census?
Right. So as what the census basically is a point in time survey, right?
Mm-hmm.
From April 1st of last year,
Yeah.
Where you were on that day, you were supposed to, as a household, submit information to the census. And because of COVID, that census population data was delayed for almost over 4 months. It was supposed to come out by April 1st of this year, but it just came out August 12th. So about 10 days ago.
And I'm just trying to get at how many are non-responders? Do we have a grip or any sort of calculation about how many people did not?
So the census will actually come out next year with with an undercount report.
Okay.
So at this moment, we don't have a good understanding of what the undercount looks like. But for redistricting purposes, the data set that we must use under federal law is what the Census Bureau gives us.
Yeah.
So although we know that there's an undercount, there's always an undercount, historically. Because the census defines the population of the United States, that's what we're bound to use. And then just a little bit background further, that in this cycle, under the Fair Maps Act, California is actually, for cities and counties, we have to use what they're calling the prisoner reallocated census population. So the legacy data set that came out last week is a precursor. In about 5 weeks, the statewide database will be releasing the final data set that all cities and counties have to use, which reallocates the prison population from the prison location they were in on April 1st, and reallocates them back to their residency from when they were arrested. So it will take people out of the state prison locations and back into their community so they can be represented from where they were before being arrested.
Tell me about the homeless community.
Yeah.
So the homeless community, there was a unique process that the census undertook in the summer of 2020 to help count. Well, actually, I'm sorry. It was actually around in early April of last year to basically do a head count of the homeless population and plot them for where they were on those. It was like a 3-day count.
So that would be reflected in the numbers.
Yeah. So if they were registered or counted in that period, that would be reflective of the legacy file data.
Do you show it as a homeless, this many?
No. So that's one other thing about the census is that it's there's no personal information, right? And we only know data at the census block level, so you can see that, like, we wouldn't. So this block here, let's do a better block. So this block here has 800 or 633 people in it, but we don't have any information about the if they're homeless. Well, actually, we would have information if they're unhoused in the census, but really for our purposes, the population is what matters the most, right? For balancing district lines. Sorry,
It gets very complex.
there are data sets out there, and I actually don't think they've released the homeless data set at this moment yet, because there's another release coming in September with the full PL file. But the population data and all of the racial information has been released by the census through the legacy file. Sean?
Yeah, I think that kind of brings up a good point, because the community survey also has other information besides just racial composition.
Right.
So I think it would probably be best for the community to have maybe some of that data to be able to map out, like, for example, homeless services is a big issue, and I think that should be something that at least could be considered. It may not be the top for everybody, but I think that's something that could very well be looked at to come up with the best information to provide to the Board of Supervisors.
You said about state prison populations being reallocated. What about county jail?
So that, under the Fair Maps Act, the legislature didn't expand the reallocation of county jail or federal prisons to that reallocated data set. So we're only going, this cycle, we're only going to reallocate the state prison population.
Okay. So Solano County Jail claiming all of the inhabitants are simply residents of that area.
Unless they were counted, because that wasn't their normal residency by their household at their
Okay.
home address.
So in kind of practical terms, if that, I think it's over 4,000 people, if those people are pulled out for Solano and CMF are pulled out of the District 4, how is that going to impact the district if, let's say, if you were wanting everything to be exactly the same, and then those 4,000 people are taken out, then it seems like there's only a few different options as far as kind of what direction, more area would need to be added to that district essentially to keep them, like I said at the beginning, they're supposed to be relatively equal. So those kind of changes could be fairly significant for the composition of the districts.
So, and I just want to finish kind of the way you guys can use district or, so the way to save this would be to give it a name. I'm just gonna say Hackville neighborhood, sorry. And then fill in a description of the community of what binds it together and why it should be held together for District